Do you think that it is important for a corporation to have an ethical mission statement or a credo? Is that useful?
Absolutely. I think a company, you have to know who you are, and you have to be able to define that to your stakeholders and certainly to your employees and to your customers, to all your stakeholders. And that means you need to have a defined ethics statement, you need to have a defined purpose, a set of values, a mission. Getting that down on paper is critically important because it codifies who you are and what you believe in and what you stand for. And in today's world where authenticity is so important, you've got to be clear about what you believe in and what you stand for. And it creates a roadmap for the organization. In a very complex business environment, in a very complex global environment, having a clear roadmap around what we believe in and what we stand for and what we will do and not do, those are important guideposts for employees out there all over the world making decisions every day in a very, very complex, very fast-changing environment.
Beyond mission statements or credos, should ethics training be provided for corporate staff?
Oh, I think ethics training should be provided for all employees in a company, and it's an ongoing challenge. We do it on an annual basis, and in our company we have online training modules that people are required to go through in a certain defined time period, and there's a set of materials that are refresher courses, and each year we add new modules to that, and we ensure full compliance to that. And I think that's one step of it. You have to make sure employees are not just going through the motions of the training, but are really internalizing what the training is about and what the company stands for. And again, for a company like eBay, we operate in a global, dynamic, rapidly changing environment. And employees are faced with complex decisions every day. And if they don't understand what we believe in, what our ethics policies are, what we value, they're not well equipped to make the right decisions that are consistent with who we are as a company and consistent with our brand and our values.
All right, so in the 25 years that you've experienced the industry, what was your greatest challenge? Can you tell us an example of a personal experience that you had? Maybe there was an ethical dilemma. Just what was a personal challenge that you had to deal with in these past 25 years?
I think the greatest challenge I ever experienced, which you see happening in some other companies today, is I was working for Gap when globalization first started to really occur, and stakeholder attention was brought to supply chains. And for Gap in the apparel industry, it was about the issue of sweatshop labor in apparel factories. With Gap and Nike, I spent almost a decade working for those two companies, and in the 1990s and into the first decade of this century, Gap and Nike were poster children, so to speak, of those issues in the apparel and footwear industries. And initially, that was an enormous communications challenge because globalization was really just starting to be understood. And some stakeholders early on were very savvy about focusing on brands to draw attention to the issue. And how you respond to that, how you understand what's the reality on the ground. When the business model was often, and you see this today, the business model was those are third-party manufacturers. If you go back 20 years, the business mindset was those are third-party vendor relationships, those are not my employees or my factory, so how do I deal with this? And so it was a big learning curve as a communications professional. Well, how do I understand what the real issues are? How do I understand what's really going on in these factories? How do I engage these stakeholders? And how do we start driving longer term solutions that are really going to solve a very complex issue? And so there was both, it was the first moment in my career where a typical communications toolkit was insufficient to address the issue. And you had to dig deeper. And you really had to start getting into fundamental business issues and supply chain issues. And it was creating a new model of stakeholder engagement. And it was one of the first examples of seeing outsiders suddenly having the power to dramatically influence your brand reputation and brand perception. And so that was a great learning experience for me, and I'm very proud to have worked for two companies that became leaders in how these issues were being dealt with on a global basis. And then you see these issues still with us today and emerging in other industries as we move forward. And so that was my first experience where there was a disruptive force happening in a business and happening in the outside world that was affecting, having brand and reputational impacts above and beyond, the normal business environment, that forced me and the people around me to rethink the way we approach a problem and to adopt a longer term view about how these issues are solved, and again, how you create new models of stakeholder engagement, which again, the exciting thing about the work at Arthur Page today is Arthur Page is trying to further the thinking and discussion around that, around what are new models of engagement, and how should corporations think about their stakeholder community, and how do you drive engagement that results in advocacy. And for me, that's exciting because I feel like my learning in that started 20 years ago, when these issues first started to surface.
Alan Marks, thank you.
Thank you.